The big vaccination push continues, targeting over 18s and pregnant women, amid demands to recall Parliament and end the pingdemic. Good evening. COVID case rates are falling as the test, trace, isolate system does its job. School summer holidays reduce infection and the Euros are just a sad memory. But perhaps fearful of what might happen this autumn, there is a push to get those still resisting vaccination through the doors, especially pregnant women and young adults. Labour is saying the government should bring forward the date fully vaccinated adults no longer have to isolate in England, while the Lib Dems want to recall Parliament to debate what they say is the introduction of vaccine passports by stealth.
Also tonight, drug deaths soar in Scotland. The First Minister admits it's a national disgrace. The number of deaths is at a record high. Nicola Sturgeon says her government hasn't done enough. Cleared, the Labour MP Apsana Begum is found not guilty of housing fraud. She claims the case was driven by malicious intent. He's a jerk. The comic Tim Renkow, who has cerebral palsy, tells us why he loves creating a disabled character people can hate.
And more utterly joyful scenes at the Olympics for Team GB as Bethany Shriever and Kai White win gold and silver medals in the BMX.
It's just been basically the race day of dreams, really. I've been visualising this day for so long. For it to actually happen to me is, it's overwhelming, and I'm so happy.
Pregnant women in England are being urged to get the COVID vaccine as new research suggests they're at greater risk of becoming seriously ill with the Delta variant. The study shows that 99% of pregnant women who were taken to hospital with COVID are unvaccinated, and they appear to have more severe symptoms. Across the UK, the number of new daily cases has fallen slightly to just over 29,500, while a further 68 deaths have been recorded. In England, the R rate, which shows how far the disease is being transmitted, is also fractionally lower than last week. Jane Death reports.
Loretta Hood's first baby is due in 7 weeks. She hasn't had the COVID vaccine. For her, it just doesn't feel right, despite today's warnings.
Yeah, it does scare me, and kind of part of me thinks I should just go and get the vaccine, but then part of me is also thinking there's no long-term data. This is still quite a new vaccine, and there's no long-term data on babies sort of, 6 months, 1 year, 2 year down the line. And I'm not anti-vaccine in the slightest. I will absolutely get it when the time's right for me, but I just think it's hard not knowing, making that decision for your unborn child, not knowing what the future is.
There's been a rise in unvaccinated women becoming really ill with COVID. At this maternity unit in London, the consultant says while we don't have long-term data, we do have a wealth of women who've had the jab with no ill effects.
We can never say, particularly when we come to pregnancy, that there is no risk. But what we can say is that the evidence so far shows that there is no significant risk in the short term. The one thing about COVID vaccination, because worldwide we have vaccinated so many women, we now do have large numbers of pregnant women who have been vaccinated, and actually more women who've taken COVID vaccine than many other drugs that we actually do give during pregnancy.
Have a seat there for me.
But hundreds of thousands of women, the vast majority of those pregnant in the past year in England, didn't have the vaccine. In the 3 months to July, 171 pregnant women with COVID needed hospital care. None had had both doses of the vaccine. The proportion suffering moderate to severe COVID has increased with the Delta variant. 1 in 7 needed intensive care, and about 1 in 5 women admitted with COVID go on to give birth prematurely. The chief midwife made this appeal.
I want you to be safe during your pregnancy. I don't want you to be in hospital with COVID and experience severe illness, or indeed have a preterm birth. So it's really important for you to have those discussions and choose to take the vaccine.
Before April, most pregnant women were being advised not to have a COVID jab. Now they are, but campaigners say it seems even some professionals are confused.
We've heard health professionals believing that the vaccine could
cause a miscarriage, which there is no evidence to support that claim. We've also heard of health professionals saying things like, oh, perhaps it's best not to have it in your first trimester because that's when things are quite delicate and you don't want to risk there being any issues, or you don't want it to have it in your third trimester because you're going to have the baby now, so very soon. So why should we risk you having the vaccine? So the messaging has just really put pregnant women off.
Something seems to be putting some young people off getting the jab. This vaccine festival in London is laying on music and food to whet their appetite.
Since vaccination was opened up to 18 to 29-year-olds last month, about 2/3 have had their first dose. Here in Tower Hamlets, only about half have taken up the offer so far. Vaccine hesitancy worries doctors, who are seeing increasing numbers of young people being admitted to hospital.
Melissa is 19 and liked being able to drop in for the vaccine without having to book.
Do you think doing it this way will encourage more people your age?
Yes, definitely. Because everyone my age, you know, they want to go out, they want to go out drinking and, you know, clubbing as well. So it's best to be safe.
To go clubbing, Melissa will need to show a vaccine passport soon. Today, opposition parties accused the government of committing to passports in other settings by stealth and demanded a vote for MPs as soon as possible.
Jane Deeth there. Now, spare a thought for roster managers everywhere. Businesses up and down the country have been struggling to fill shifts as hundreds of thousands of workers get pinged by the NHS Test and Trace app and are told to self-isolate. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has challenged the Prime Minister to bring forward the day when double-jabbed adults can be exempted from self-isolation in England, in line with Labour-controlled Wales. Here's our business and global trade correspondent, Paul McNamara.
Remember these? British Airways owner IAG is betting big you do and ramping up its flight schedule. Between now and September, it will operate 45% of capacity on pre-COVID levels as restrictions ease, possibly rising to 75% by the end of the year. It's not getting people away on holiday, but keeping them at work that Keir Starmer says the government needs to change its rules on, though. In England, as of August 16th, if you're double vaccinated and pinged by the NHS app, you won't have to self-isolate. In Labour-governed Wales, it's the rule from August 7th, and Sir Keir agrees.
Welsh Labour have obviously taken the lead on this and said in clear terms that if you're double vaccinated, you don't need to self-isolate from the 7th of August. And I'm challenging the government. We should do the same and allow some order to come back into our lives, allow some stability for holidays and for businesses.
This is a plan, though, the government is not backing down from, and they say it's data driving decisions.
It is the case that the Office of National Statistics have told us that 1 in 3 people who are asked to self-isolate do go on to develop coronavirus. So important, whilst the numbers are still relatively high, though we're pleased to see trending downwards, it is important to have this last ability just to try to keep a lid on things. It's only 2.5 weeks away, and the 16th of August will be the point at which we're able to get rid of that.
It's not milk. Some industries are hurting more than others.
It's not milk. It's fresh milk filtered for purity.
A national shortage of drivers is being compounded by the pingdemic, says the largest dairy company in the UK, a company that supplies 2,400 shops and supermarkets. What are you seeing at the moment? How are you being affected?
We are not able at the moment, because we just don't have enough drivers to supply about 10% of those 2,400. And it's worse on the weekend. So last weekend on Saturday, there were 600 shops, and we're talking about big shops here, not just corner shops, big supermarkets, that we just weren't able to supply milk to.
The cows are still working, even if there are too few drivers to transport the fruits of their labour. And with increased numbers of those self-isolating, almost 700,000 according to the latest figures. For industry, August 17th, just 2.5 weeks away, can't come soon enough.
Well, earlier I spoke to Professor John Edmonds from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, and I asked him whether he thought cases of the Delta variant had peaked.
It's really hard to say. I know, all of us come on here and always say this sort of thing, but it really is. I think there's probably a couple of things that have been happening, 3 things really that have been happening that have a big impact on the epidemiology. One was the Euros, and that did cause a spike in cases. And then after that, the pingdemic occurred, which probably helped reduce it. And that was straight after, probably related again to the Euros and people being pinged and contact traced because they were in the same setting as someone else. So that probably helped reduce cases then subsequently. Then school closures come into place and kicked in and will hopefully hold cases low now for the next few weeks, next 6 weeks.
The test, trace, isolate, you know, using the app and people staying at home when it pings is working. It's still a good thing.
Yes, I think it has been quite effective over the last few weeks. I think there's sort of reasonably good evidence for that. That it certainly, there was a bump in cases associated with the Euros, particularly the final, and I think the reduction that happened right afterwards has a lot to do with the contact tracing.
So what do you think the impact will be of stopping the requirement of people who are vaccinated to isolate?
Well, you know, it's an additional risk, of course. Hopefully by then we may have other tools as well. There's a trial that's ongoing at the moment looking at what's known as daily contact testing. This is testing of individuals' contacts every day using a lateral flow. And that trial should come up with some results in the coming weeks, I think. So hopefully there may be that might open up another opportunity. You know,
we're at tens of deaths every day. Is that just the way it's always going to be now?
There's many millions of unvaccinated children, many millions of unvaccinated young adults, and so you add all of those up, that's an awful lot of people. So you know, if we continue to have infection at high rates in the population, it will overspill into older age groups who are mostly vaccinated but not exclusively. And the vaccines are not 100% effective; they never will be. And so you will get hospitalizations and unfortunately deaths.
People have been talking about, you know, as getting towards the end of this year and being able to look back on the epidemic. You know, is there really any reason for that, given there's always going to be a new variant that takes hold, you know, spreads through, some people go into hospital, some people die, and then it dies away? Isn't that just going to carry on forever now?
Although we've had sort of 3 waves of the epidemic, they've all been interrupted so far by interventions, by lockdowns. So really, we're in the first wave. This is the first big wave of the epidemic where we were all susceptible at the beginning of it. And we're coming out of that now where most of us are immune through vaccination, but also through natural immunity as well. And so I think that once we get over that, that's the sort of the first big wave. And then we can look back at it a little bit. And then I do think we might well be hit by other variants who can escape the immune response to some extent, or even just waning immunity anyway. So I think we're likely to have waning immunity from both vaccines and natural immunity that's likely to wane. And so we're likely to get further waves anyway, even if the virus doesn't mutate even further, which all of us expect it to do.
So it's not over, is it? By any stretch?
We're going to live with COVID forevermore. You know, it's a sad fact. You know, we can't get out of it. That's always been the case. Once this particular genie got out of the bottle back in whenever it was, early last year, we were always going to be stuck with this forevermore.
John Evans, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Now, a 24-year-old former estate agent has admitted assaulting England's chief medical officer, Professor Chris Whitty, in a central London park. Footage showing the incident in June was widely shared on social media, prompting a police investigation. Lewis Hughes from Romford in Essex was sentenced to 8 weeks in prison, suspended for 2 years. A second man, 24-year-old Jonathan Chew, denied assault and will appear in court again in November.
The number of drugs deaths in Scotland has soared to record levels for the 7th year in a row, with more than 1,300 people losing their lives to drugs. And the problem is far worse in the country's least affluent areas, where people are 18 times more likely to die than those who are better off. First Minister Nicola Sturgeon called it a national disgrace, admitting her government hadn't done enough to tackle the crisis. Kamian Zeram reports.
We're begging the people of Scotland to get behind this. There's not a family here that hasn't suffered.
Central Glasgow and families of those who've lost precious ones to drugs unveil a statue. Face into the mirror. It could be you, someone you love, someone you loved.
We're getting increase upon increase of deaths. How can that be right?
Addiction absolutely destroyed me.
New data published today show more people died in Scotland from drugs than ever before. Last year, the figure rose to 1,339, a grim new record. It continues the long-term trend. The rate of drug-related deaths in Europe has broadly stayed the same over time. But look at what's happened in Scotland. In some places, it's now more than 300 per million people, over 20 times the European average.
We need to have more treatment options, and we are expanding the range of treatments currently available, but it also means that we need to ensure that we get the right treatment when people ask for it that is suited to them. So we need far more person-centred care with individual packages of support to meet people's needs.
The causes are complex. Combine newer substances like ultra-cheap so-called street Valium with conventional drugs like heroin, and crucially, reduced funding for rehab. In Glasgow, there are 100,000 people with addiction issues and 18, yes, just 18 rehab beds. The Scottish Tories are backing calls for a right to recovery to be made law.
They want the help, they are seeking the support, but they can't get it, which is why we believe enshrining that in law is a positive way forward. It's not a silver bullet, it's not going to solve all the problems, but it is a way to start dealing with this crisis.
So what is the solution? There are mixed views on safe places to inject, for example. Never mind that the only one in Scotland, this van, is temporarily off the road. The Scottish Government today pledged £250 million for new treatments, such as overdose reversal drugs. Stephen Scott battled addiction for years and has been in and out of jail. This football project is just part of his rehab. The new investment, he says, is long overdue.
The first time I was in prison, I don't think that availability was there. I think the programme's quite fresh and it's new. But it's good to see like the state actually putting money into trying to really rehabilitate people.
Since the SNP came to power, 10,000 people in Scotland have died from drug-related causes. The First Minister has previously admitted they took their eye off the ball. But as well as promising new funding today, they want reform of drug laws which criminalise users. Laws that are not set by Holyrood, but Westminster.
The Labour MP, Afsana Begum, has been cleared of housing fraud, saying the case against her had been driven by malicious intent and had caused great distress and damage to her reputation. Tower Hamlets Council in East London had brought the action relating to her application for council housing between 2013 and 2016. Our political correspondent Liz Bates is in Westminster. Liz.
Yes, so the main issue in this case was that Tower Hamlets Council said that Afsana Begum misled them over a number of years to get a council flat that she wasn't entitled to. She denied that, and today the jury found in her favour. But there was also another aspect to this trial that came across very strongly in court, and that's that Miss Begum said that during this period she was a victim of domestic abuse in her marriage to Atasham Hack. She painted a picture of him in court as someone who controlled her emotionally and financially, and she said that he had a problem with alcohol and that after their marriage ended, he continued to harass her. When the verdict was delivered today, Miss Begum broke down in court. She sobbed and sunk to her knees, and soon after that she gave this statement.
This case has been driven by malicious intent and has caused me great distress and damage to my reputation. As a survivor of domestic abuse facing these vexatious charges, the last 18 months of false allegations and accusations, online, sexist, racist and Islamophobic abuse and threats to my safety have been exceedingly difficult.
A couple of things that were noted in court were, first of all, that this complaint that ended up leading to this court case was brought by the brother-in-law of Mr Hack. Mr Hack is still a councillor at Tower Hamlets Council, the council, of course, that pursued this case against his ex-wife. In a statement today, Mr Hack denied any inappropriate behaviour towards Miss Begum during their marriage. He said that the allegations had come as a surprise to him and that their separation had been amicable. In a separate statement, Tower Hamlets said that it was their duty to pursue this case, but that they now accepted the verdict and consider the matter closed.
Liz Bates.
Now, more than 200 former Afghan interpreters who worked alongside US forces have arrived at a military airbase near Washington, D.C. under a new visa scheme to help relocate them out of harm's way. Their safety is on the line as US forces pull out of the country, while advancing Taliban fighters are capturing a swathe of districts and key border crossings. Kate Fisher is in Washington now. Kate.
Well, this is the first day of a new life in the United States for 221 Afghans. They're the first group of 2,500 who will be relocated here after President Biden decided to withdraw American troops from the country, leaving them in a vulnerable position. 4,000 others and their family members will be heading to third-party countries where their visas will be processed.
Hello, this is Look Around with a full half hour of news and sport for Cumbria and the south of Scotland. On the programme tonight,
today, the Senate cleared $1 billion to help with the evacuations.
To say well done to Luke Greenbank for getting our first medal at these Olympic Games. 3 tests. 3 tests. But that's all from us. So from the team here, thanks for watching. Goodbye.
Praise the success of this first flight.
Since the first of this year, our consular staff in Kabul has issued over 5,000 special immigrant visas and interviewed thousands more, some of whom departed yesterday. We are proud of that and of yesterday's success. Much work remains ahead to meet America's commitment to those who've been committed to us.
In the UK, there have been calls for a greater commitment to the Afghan interpreters that help the British military as well. 12 former commanders writing an open letter to the Prime Minister, calling for more help to resettle them in the UK, saying that if any of them were killed by the Taliban, then the dishonour would lay squarely at our nation's feet.
Thanks very much, Kate.
Now the latest.
Now, policing is still riddled with racial disparities, say MPs, more than 2 decades after the Macpherson report into the Stephen Lawrence murder exposed the extent of institutional racism in
Hello
police.
and welcome to
the Home
ITV
Affairs Select
News.
Committee says that since then, police have failed to reform themselves, and governments on all sides haven't done enough to tackle racial injustice either. Police leaders said the slow pace of change was a deep regret, promising to do better. Simeon Brown reports.
This was a landmark moment in the history of British policing and civil rights. The public inquiry into the failures of the Metropolitan Police to investigate the racist murder of Stephen Lawrence.
News in the West Country.
1999.
If you are black or Asian in Britain today, you don't get as good a deal from the justice system, from public services, from private institutions, as white people do and as you deserve. That's the reality. We've got to change it.
The Macpherson report ruled that the Met were guilty of institutional racism and made 70 recommendations for change.
Work with us in making these changes happen.
But 22 years on, a new parliamentary report has cast doubt on just how much has. The Home Affairs Committee of Crossbench MPs called for urgent action to tackle what it called persistent, deep-rooted and unjustified racial disparities in 4 key areas. A lack of confidence from the black and mixed ethnic communities the police serve. A lack of progress in recruiting BME officers. Problems with misconduct proceedings where BME officers are more than twice as likely as their white colleagues to be dismissed. And unjustified racial disparities in stop and search.
We did find improvements in policing for the better, including, for example, on the prosecution of racist crimes. But we also found big problems and persistent problems. At the current rate of progress, police forces aren't going to fully represent the communities they serve for another 20 years.
None of this comes as a surprise to former senior black and brown officers.
I don't think there's a will to reform the police. I don't have a great deal of confidence in the Home Office to deliver equality. I don't have confidence in the chief officers to deliver equality. And I think we can just see that from the facts.
Yet the Home Office say the facts show the police is more diverse than ever. They're recruiting more officers and have a new plan to beat crime. But at the heart of this will be enhanced stop and search powers, a big area of disproportionality and distrust that shows no sign of change.
Well, earlier I spoke to the former Greater Manchester Chief Constable Sir Peter Fahy and Palm Sandhu, who was the highest-ranking female Asian police officer in the Met until she resigned in 2019, claiming systematic and long-term discrimination on grounds of her race and gender. And I asked Sir Peter whether he thought there were any grounds for optimism when so many things haven't got better.
Yeah, I possibly wouldn't be as optimistic as Pam. I think that the trouble is there is a lot of inconsistency at the moment. For this to happen, I think, as Palmer said, you need a clear national lead. You need a national consistency. You certainly need a style of policing which is very locally accountable. And the trouble is a lot of the neighbourhood policing that we've seen, over better years has been eroded because of the cuts and other changes, increasing specialisation. You need to recognise that just getting more black officers of itself does not necessarily improve things, as we've seen the evidence in the United States. So it needs this clear political leadership. I think the police chiefs themselves recognise there is a problem, want to do more, and also recognise that, if anything, the situation on the ground is getting more difficult and more critical. And therefore, the police absolutely need to treat this seriously.
Palm Sandhu, I mean, the report explicitly points out the problem of representation within the force and recruitment. But when somebody like you leaves the force, saying it's essentially racist, discriminatory, that you felt unsafe at times, unsupported, why on earth would anybody join?
The only way that you can actually make a difference is from within, and I tried to do that over my 30 years. Peter does make some very good points there, because recruiting people isn't going to be the whole answer. That's not going to be the holistic approach. What we need to do is we need to make sure those people are valued, they can speak up when there is wrongdoing, and that they are then promoted and looked after within the police service. What's happening at the moment is we've got a revolving door. We've got people who are joining the police service and then are not remaining there. They are either voluntarily resigning or they are being dismissed. Black police officers are more than 2 or 3 times more likely to be investigated for internal complaints, and then they're twice as likely to be sacked. So it's not just about...
Exactly. I mean, you're making my point. Why would any 21 or 22-year-old want to join the police?
You don't join policing for the money. You join it because you want to make a difference. And those young people out there, not just young people, older people as well, they can make that difference from within.
Peter, isn't that putting an absolutely unfair responsibility on black and Asian new recruits? That they don't just have to go in and be good police officers. They've got to go and change the organisation as well. I mean, that's absurd, isn't it?
I think you're right. It is a huge responsibility that is placed upon them. That's why so many struggle, particularly when you're talking about a hierarchical organisation where you have to climb up. And often when you get to the more senior levels, you can feel very alone. Those black officers like Palm that have tried to challenge and have said some difficult things often find their lives made more difficult. And that's because, too much of policing is still a very traditional hierarchical organisation. And it needs to modernise in the way that many other organisations have modernised.
Cressida Dick is precisely one of those people who refuses to accept the institutional racism accusation. She says it's unhelpful. Is she the problem?
My advice would be accept it as an opportunity and not as a threat, and get on with it. She has become part of the problem, because if you don't acknowledge it, how will you actually make a change? And I think that in the past, there were people like Peter, and he was at the forefront of making that difference, because I was involved in some of his work. But there are fewer and fewer of those individuals, because, as Peter has said, they're being controlled by PCCs or they're being controlled by the politics. And policing has become very, very political. Instead of looking out for our communities and doing the best job that we can, sometimes it is about jumping to the right tunes and about the politics around you.
So, Peter, would you lay blame at Cressida Dick's door?
No, absolutely not. I know Cressida. She has been one of the people who have really pushed for the modernisation of policing. I think lots of police chiefs, while they may not find the institutionally racist label helpful, they are speaking out about the level of poverty, they're speaking about the level of inequality, they are speaking out about things like school exclusions. I think a lot of them are pushing for a more considered approach. But absolutely, I think, Cressida has been one of those that has been pushing, has been leading. But as I say, I think she's finding that it is getting more difficult. And of course, she is a good example of somebody who's caught between the politics of the Home Secretary and the politics of the Mayor.
So where's the real failure then? Is it the Home Secretary?
No, I think the real failure is that there has just not been, a push for a fundamental reform of policing, so that policing is now, struggles to deal with lots of modern forms of crime. It's not that individual chiefs or even individual Home Secretaries have not had their own initiatives and task forces. It's that we've not looked at policing and says it needs fundamental reform to deal with particular societal problems, the difficult, the changes in attitudes, and particularly, the changes in the way that criminals and crime is taking place now.
But you're always very good at explaining the challenges that the police are up against, and you've just done it again. That doesn't explain why individual police officers, black and Asian police officers, are victimised more than white ones, or why there are problems with promotion or problems with the way, black people are handled by the police. That's more than, they've got a problem with drugs policy, isn't it? That's racism.
Well, I would argue not. I mean, obviously there are individual failings and individual awful cases in the experiences of black officers. But the trouble, as I say, you're playing it into a very traditional organisation, a hierarchical organisation, a quasi-military organisation in its structure. You've got some quite old-fashioned employment practices which make it more difficult to drive change.
Sandu, when you left, you offered to help, didn't you? Have any chief constables taken you up?
No, not yet. I'm still waiting for the phone to ring, and I'm getting up really early in the morning to hear that ringtone. I did actually offer my services to Cressida and also to MOPAC as well for London policing, because through my lived experiences, they don't actually reflect what Peter's saying. It isn't about the hierarchical system. It's not about the semi-military, where the police service came from. This is about the here and now, and this is about. And you always come out with this story about there are a few bad apples, there are a few individuals who make life difficult. No, it's not. It's policies and procedures. It's not about individuals. And there is no reason why those policies and procedures haven't been changed and can't be changed.
Palm Sandu, Sir Peter Fye, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, 100,000 Syrians out of 4 million refugees in Turkey have been allowed temporary rights to visit their homeland during the Eid al-Adha holiday. Among them, Fariza, who's managed to make her first trip back to her old home in the town of Binish in Syria's northern Idlib province. The entire region remains highly dangerous, and as she discovers, the reality is proving very different to the memories of the place she once called home.
الله لا يحرمني البس المضوي.
كيفك مرتعمي شو أخبارك؟
For almost 10 years, Mohammed's mother, Faiza, has only seen her family through the glass of a smartphone. Tomorrow, she will be returning to Syria for the first time since the civil war began.
يعني انه يا الله انه شو صار هيك بالسوريين انه معقول نحن نصير مثل الفلسطينيين مثلا وانه هيك ما بقى نرجع على بيوتنا او كذا.
Faiza's son Mohammed readies his mother's old garden and makes last-minute preparations for tomorrow's homecoming.
هذا التراب العطشان بتأثير الشمس الشديدة يعني يمكن هلا بظن انه انا مثل هذا التراب هلا شوقي لأمي مثل هذا التراب بجوز أكثر بكثير يعني. الله يخلي لي هاتي.
هنا مرتك
هاي مرتي هلا بتلاقي روض الأطفال تشرف
But this town, Binish, is not the same place it was a decade ago. Buildings have been demolished by airstrikes.
جيراني غير جيران هلا، باركين نازحين مهجرين من ضياعهم، يعني صار عندنا جيران جدد خلينا نقول، تبدلت الحاره كليا، المدمر على الارض مدمر واللي واقف حيطينها قاعدين فيهم نازحين. هلا بكره بتشوفيهم قديش دراويش وفقيرين.
Binish, like the rest of Idlib province in northern Syria, has become a vast human warehouse for the defeated opponents of the Assad regime. There are now 3 million people in this province alone.
إذا رحنا لشمال كمان بتشوفي إنه الخيم على مد البصر.
The community that Pfizer once knew no longer exists.
شوفي حاولي تتأملي الأشخاص. حاولي تعرفي حدا من الموجودين هون.
ماني شايفة حدا أبدا بعد.
Parts of her hometown no longer exist either. And this is why. This was the day Faiza was forced from her home. Her house received a direct hit. The whole neighborhood was being targeted by the regime's helicopter gunships and other heavy weapons. Faiza had to run, quite literally, for her life. But her son Mohammed was a young revolutionary activist, and he stayed behind to carry on the struggle.
فرحانة إنه شفت أولادي أغلى شيء على قلبي وحزينة على ضيعتي شلون متدمرة وسوريا. عدستي إنه هاي بنيش هيك تتدمر.
خليتها تعلمك الطبخ مثل ما هيك تطبخ، لأنه أنا هيك بحبه هيك متعود عليه.
But there is new life here in Binish. Faiza's garden provides both the centerpiece of her old home and an anchor to her past.
كيلو لزرعاتك بما إنه صار لكم كثير ما شفتوا بعضكم.
اي والله
احكي لهم عن احوالك وعن اخبارك.
شو احوالي
وعن اشواقك.
كثير حزينه بدوني لانه ما يعني كنت كل نهار الصبح عبس ايهم وبحكي معهم وبشكي لهم احزاني. والله لما القصف والدمار والخوف والرعب ما تركت تكون وحيده. كنت بايد معكم وصعيدكم الديات ذكر اليوم. بس الرعب والخوف خلاني اتركهم لاني مريضه.
Lovingly tended for years, awaiting the day she finally came home.
انت اللي زرعتيها هون لونها احمر وحتى هاي وقتها حطيتي عود واخذ وقتها نشف من البرد ورجع لحاله طريق مره الاخرى.
كان هيك بيطلع شبر صغير.
Faiza's beloved garden remains, but her friends do not.
وينك يا عم محمد يا عم احمد مساي. تعالوا يا ام محمد انا رجعت. وينكم يا جيراني؟ أنا كل نهار العصر مثل المنتزه. هلا ما لا السكوت وحده وهذا وحده شريفة هسي حالة صحراء.
Her fleeting visit brought her face to face with loved ones, but her trip was not really a journey home.
لا بالعكس وقت طلعت على الحارة ما حدا رد علي، ما في حدا. يعني هاد الشيء بيحزن إنه أنا أجي ألاقي مدينتي خراب، تحولت لخراب لدمار. ما بعرف، شعور صعب كتير. كأني ما بعرف، كأني بمطرح مقطوع، أحس حالي وعم بصيح وما في حدا.
Human remains found in the Pyrenees are those of the missing British hiker Esther Dingley, according to DNA tests. The 37-year-old was last seen on the 22nd of November last year while she was on a solo walk through the mountains. The charity LBT Global, which is representing her family, said a bone found last week was a match. Her mother and partner said it was devastating beyond words.
A man has been jailed for 5 years and 3 months at Hove Crown Court for carrying out a campaign of cat killings. Security guard Steve Bouquet was convicted last month of 16 offences of criminal damage after he killed 9 cats and injured 7 others in a spate of attacks in Brighton between October 2018 and June 2019.
The authorities in Greece have ordered extra fire patrols and inspections as forecasters warned temperatures will climb as high as 42 Celsius well into next week. As the intense heat wave continues, fed by hot air from Africa, 4 people have already lost their lives in wildfires raging across southern Turkey. People were forced to evacuate villages and beach resorts as strong winds pushed the flames towards their homes. Guests at one luxury hotel near Bodrum had to be evacuated in boats.
Now, at the Olympics, it's been a day of celebration for Team GB's BMX riders after Bethany Shriver and Kai White claimed Britain's first ever Olympic medals in the sport. Shriver took gold in the women's event after White silver in the men's, as Team GB ended the day with a further 6 medals in Tokyo, bringing the total to 24. Our sports reporter, Jordan Jarrett-Bryant, reports.
There's been plenty of ups and downs for BMX rider Beth Shriver. But last night, the ultimate high was experienced as she became the first ever British Olympic champion in the sport. Shriver had to crowdfund £50,000 for her own qualification campaign after UK Sport cut its support for her event. The 22-year-old held off her rivals to cross the finishing line and realise a dream.
It's just been basically the race day of dreams, really. I've been visualising this day for so long. For it to actually happen to me is, yeah, it's overwhelming, and I'm so happy.
Exhausted to the point of collapsing, her teammate Kai White had to carry her off the track. This shortly after White himself had made history, winning Team GB's first ever Olympic medal in the sport. Chasing down gold, he fell just short, but a silver at his first games is something he'll be extremely proud of. The emotions were almost overwhelming when his family FaceTimed him after the race.
Do you know, I couldn't even speak. Like, I had the little gulp on my throat and I couldn't even speak past it, and it was, I wanted to cry, but I had to keep it together, and yeah, it was so emotional. It's an experience I never thought I'd experience, but yeah, I've done it, and yeah, I'm super happy.
From global to local, back where it all began for White. The Peckham BMX Club is where Kai and his elder brother Trey both honed their skills. But unlike most, the brothers never doubted Kai's chances of grabbing a medal at these games.
I said, you've done it, bro. Like, you've done it. Like, it's literally, you're bringing it home, you've done it. And he just says, massive smile on his face, like pretty much speechless. And just a normal lingo between us, like, come on, bro, you know I got this. Oh, listen, words can't explain. Like, we grew up dreaming of this, speaking about this, like, constantly. If it wasn't going to be me, it was going to be him. Do you know what I mean? So, and more time growing up, I had a feeling it was going to be him. I'm not going to lie. I said from the beginning, this kid's different, man. He's got something about him.
Trey, a former BMX national champion himself, understands the importance of clubs like these and the accessibility of them.
Oh, so important. Like, when I first started BMX, when we first started the club, there was 8 of us, right? started Peckham BMX, and now you come to this club, there's 80, 90 riders. And then you've got Aylesbury Estate right there. The kids more time have nothing to do. And these areas are known for trouble, known for bad things, but we've got clubs like this who are generating worlds, Olympic, come on, world champions, Olympic medalists.
6-year-old Micah has only been riding for 4 months, but is an example of the young people the club is trying to reach.
A lot of people can identify with Kai. They look similar. You know, someone say, well, he's from Peckham, I'm from Peckham. You know, look what he's achieved.
Many more will come through, whether it's this club or other clubs. We've got Brixton, there's Merton, Hackney, Hayes Hawks. All the young boys and girls will push and see, like I said, inspiration like Kai.
Kai's mentor and coach is keen to produce more Olympic champions, but also understands the value in just having a safe space for the local youth.
Keeping kids off the street, keeping them out of gang culture, and this is why we do so well here, because parents feel that this is a safe haven for young people.
But all legacy talk to one side, Kai can expect a good old-fashioned homecoming, South London style.
Wherever Kai is, that's what the party is. Wherever, it's going to be a lit one. It's going to be a lit one, definitely. We've been waiting for it. We've been waiting a long time for this.
In other events, there was more success for Team GB in the pool. Duncan Scott claimed his 3rd medal in Tokyo, silver in the 200 metres individual medley. And Luke Greenbank took bronze in the 200-metre backstroke. There was also bronze for Bryony Page in the women's trampoline and for the men's 8 in rowing. And on the track, medal hopeful Dina Asher-Smith qualified 2nd in her opening 100 metres heat. England cricketer Ben Stokes says he's taking an indefinite break from all cricket to focus on his mental health. The all-rounder has withdrawn from England's Test squad for the series against India, starting next week.
After the break, when it's meant to be awkward, we speak to Tim Renkow about the latest series of his new comedy show about living with cerebral palsy and creating a disabled character you'll love to hate. Welcome back. He's a jerk, and it's fine not to like him. The latest series of Jerk, starring the stand-up comedian and actor Tim Renkow, begins this week, based on a heightened version of his own experience of living with cerebral palsy. It's a deliberately unsettling and subversive comedy which aims to turn other people's uneasiness about his character into pure awkwardness. I've been speaking to him about the show.
Watching and I'm waiting, hoping for the best. Even think I'll go to praying every time I hear them saying,
that looks like a good cake.
There's no way today, that trouble coming every day.
I mean, the portrayal of disabled people in the past was often quite saccharine, a little bit sweet. They were either angels or special. And there is absolutely nothing saccharine about your character.
No.
He is exactly as it says on the tin, an absolute jerk.
Yeah, no, I tried doing saccharine once, and I was allergic to it. I just couldn't do it. So, yeah. No, I really wanted to portray a disabled person as a normal kind of sitcom character that has all the normal flaws you expect from anyone in a sitcom.
My exhibition evokes the true experience of suffering with cerebral palsy.
It does, in a way, because it's awful.
In the first series, there's an absolutely brilliant scene with your character who has a fight with the man who has to speak through a computer. And you're both brilliantly horrible.
No, we're just not good people, which is fine. Because I think the point is you can only really be a good person if you have the ability not to be a good person.
And the thing about that is it shows your character as completely rounded. And that we don't see very often, even now.
Yeah, no, and I mean, it's just a fundamental of storytelling, which everyone should have, is a well-rounded character.
And why was it so important to you to make this series?
I just wanted a portrayal of disability that wasn't, as you said, saccharine, and they gave me the opportunity to do it, and very few people get an opportunity, so I just had to take it.
And it's not about making people feel comfortable, is it? I love this. There's a bit, I think, in the titles when you walk down the road and a kid sees you and starts to scream.
Yeah.
And there is something brilliantly funny about that.
Yeah.
Though not comfortable necessarily.
That really happened in real life, and I just thought it was funny, and it's a genuine reaction I get, which I think is really funny when it happens, because it's not. It can be it can be teachable. So it's like there's no point in wringing your hands over stuff like that. It's more important to show it really happens, and then to show it's fine.
And that's talking about children, but what about the adults? I mean, are people still saying to you, oh, it's ever so good you're out, or you're very brave?
With adults, it's a bit more complicated because they're not as willing to learn, I guess, because they're adults, so they know. But I do feel like it comes down to just on education, which just isn't a crime to me. Like, if you don't know, you don't know, and if I have to be the one to tell you, it's fine. I can do that.
I mean, we've been looking this week at the government's new, I think, £1.6 billion disability strategy.
Yeah.
What do you think it needs to deliver? Because people with disabilities face huge challenges in terms of employment. Still, accessibility is an enormous problem. I mean, where do you think the change needs to come?
The two most important things from my point of view are working and housing, which is housing's extremely difficult for disabled people. So I'd probably focus on housing.
Would you say accessibility has improved? We've done a lot on that over the last few years, but we're still hearing stories of disabled people stuck on trains.
I think it has improved, but like, it's gonna take a lot more. Like, there's gonna have to be a lot more work to be done, but it's definitely improving, slowly but surely.
And at the end of Jerk, what do you hope people take away from your character, apart from the fact he is indeed a jerk?
I mean, that is kind of what I want people to take away from it. It's just that at the end of the day, I just want people to kind of forget about the disability and just realize it's a sitcom character that is ultimately making you laugh.
Tim Renko, thanks very much for coming in and talking to us today.
Thank you for having me.
Tonight's main news. Pregnant women in England have been urged to get the COVID jab, as new data finds that those who haven't been vaccinated are more at risk, and those who do end up in hospital with the Delta variant appear to have more severe symptoms. Medical chiefs say it shows vaccines are the best way to stay safe and out of hospital.
That's all we have time for this evening. We're back at 5:05 tomorrow evening.
Until then, from all of us here, that's Channel 4 News. Have a great weekend.
Good evening.